And as we say, the winner goes on, the loser goes home.
Yeah, that's right, Riley. A lot at stake here in this match, obviously for our players, for the reasons you outlined, but also, for us as spectators. Autumn Burchett is the last non-Omnath Adventures deck in our field.
Yes, indeed. This Gruul aggro, Gruul Adventures deck, the only non-Omnath deck remaining in the tournament, and that is not how you want to start things off. A mulligan to 5, very unfortunate start for our Gruul hero here. Bursavich, however, on a cool 7 cards to start with, so the wind already in his sails before the game's even begun.
I will say, if there's one, saving grace of Autumn mulliganing to 5 here, I've been watching this Gruul deck over the course of the weekend, and what's impressed me is not so much its potential for, we'll say nut draws. When you think of like the aggressive Embercleave decks, mono red, you tend to think of the games where they go like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, Embercleave, you're dead, like the very best high roll type of draws. What's really impressed me with this Gruul deck is actually how good its medium draws are.
Yeah,
like I almost think that when both decks draw average, the Gruul deck tends to come out on top. And part of this is the modal double-faced cards, the double-faced land spells, and the nature of the threats being so potent individually that, we have seen Autumn Burchett and Emma Handy win games on mulligans to 5. We've seen them win games with average looking opening hands. So let's not count any chickens before they hatch, I guess is what I'll say.
Not. I mean, earlier on in this very top 8, we saw Autumn come from what looked like a long way behind and just clutch a victory out of thin air with their Embercleave. And that's the power of this deck. Occasionally we see Brushfire Elemental getting pumped up here. So decision point now for Bursavich. He can fire off this Stomp. But no, it looks like he's content to take some damage here. And now here's an interesting point. You can mutate the Gemrazor onto the Elemental and still benefit from the landfall bonus, right?
Yes, absolutely. It preserves all abilities of the card. That includes the landfall. That includes not being able to be blocked by small creatures. And I think this is what Autumn had in mind with their opening hand. In fact, it was, Forest, Mountain, Brushfire Elemental, Gemrazor. So a feature of this Gruul deck is kind of just building one big monster and seeing if it's good enough. And hey, I mean, Austin actually did not have the red mana on this crucial turn for a Stomp that might have changed the texture of the game. And now, he's behind against a 7/7 attacker, a 6/6 attacker, excuse me.
Yeah, this Gemrazor is rough and ready. Going to get in for a huge chunk of damage here. And we saw Austin had that Stomp in hand, chose not to employ it against the Brushfire Elemental. We'll see if that is a decision that comes back to haunt him, because now, of course, the Gemrazor, mutated as it is, completely out of range from that 2 damage from Stomp.
Yeah, so now it's, with Austin not having very many copies of Brazen Borrower and Giant Killer in his deck, he is kind of forced to play defense by blocking, which historically over the course of this tournament has not been very effective against Gruul.
Certainly not, especially given Gemrazor has Trample as well here. So a great start here for Autumn, considering that they did mulligan to 5. Let's not forget, off to a nice aggressive start. Now, here with no double red, you can't double Stomp the Gemrazor. Excuse me, the Fabled Passage can get a Mountain. So is that the answer here, or do you just go for Omnath potentially?
Hey, ordinarily using 2 cards to kill 1 creature is not ideal, but when your opponent has, number 1, invested 2 creatures into that body, number 2, they've mulliganed to 5, number 3, this is a deck that tends to spiral but doesn't do much when it starts its turn with no creature on the battlefield. That play looks better and better and better until actually I think it's just a great leads to a great position for Austin.
So Austin there, double Stomp to get rid of the Gemrazor, of course, just a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-2 trade here. Now, a Stonecoil Serpent's an interesting draw for Autumn. Can play it as either a 3/3 or a 4/4 this turn, and then mutate the Gemrazor. We know Gemrazor synergizes very powerfully with Stonecoil Serpent. For those of you who haven't seen that interaction before, Stonecoil Serpent comes in with X +1/+1 counters and retains them even after the mutation here. So it's very powerful indeed. But instead, it's a Stomp on what is definitely one of the premier threats in the Adventures deck. and still going to cast this Stonecoil Serpent after stomping that Innkeeper.
Now, I really like the way Autumn played this turn. And from our perspective, we know that Austin is pretty likely to just play Omnath this turn anyway. But from Autumn's perspective, it's like, hey, things are going badly. I took a mulligan. I lost my creature. I need something to go right. But I'm looking at those Bone Crusher Giants in the adventure zone. Let me kill this Innkeeper and hope that the best Austin can do with his next turn is just play a 4/3 off of adventure. And I think that was for sure the right call from Autumn. Unfortunately, if you're a fan of Autumn, Austin has a pretty strong hand in this game, so I'm not sure if it's going to lead to a win.
Gemrays are going to get busy here after this mutate. Coming in for 6. And that was the synergy I was talking about there. The Gemrays are pairing beautifully with Stonecoil Serpent in order to really turn up the heat. So Bursavich down to 7. Although I can't imagine that's going to... Austin's probably going to gain some life here. This is obviously what Omnath does best when it comes into play. Immediately tries to stabilize your life total very, very neatly.
Austin actually had an opportunity for a reasonable block there. You could double block, put 7 toughness in front of the 6/6 trample, and sure, you lose your Bone Crusher Giant, but you actually could soak up all of the trample damage. So opportunity to cash in Bone Crusher Giant for 6 life if he wanted to. The fact that he didn't makes me think that he may be interested in engaging in either a race or some creature combat, try to multi-block and kill the Gemraiser on a future turn.
Well, this all-out attack here to put Autumn down to 7 indicates that Austin isn't too unhappy about the idea of getting aggro Kazandu Mammoth off the top for Autumn. In addition to that Brushfire Elemental in hand, a couple of landfall creatures here. It's funny, we've called this deck Gruul Adventures, although the Adventures part is rather minimal, to be honest. There's only 8 adventure creatures in addition to that Innkeeper. We could just as well call it Gruul Landfall, really, with how important Brushfire Elemental and the Mammoth are. Not to mention, of course, the new modal double face lands, Shatterskull Smashing.
Yeah, so tuning into this game, Autumn has many different ways to play this turn, none of which match up really well against the Brazen Borrower. So I think the presence of that card is going to, eventually lead Austin to winning one way or another here. But to piggyback on what you said a moment ago, Riley, I'm glad you brought up the particulars of this Gruul deck, because it's actually quite unintuitive to me. You know, you have the adventure package, but not going all the way. Only 8 adventure creatures, no Rimrock Knights. You have the landfall package, but not going all the way. Only Brushfire Elemental and Kazandu Mammoth, no Akum Hellhound. So, and then on top of all that, I feel like I could have played 50 hours of practice matches with Gruul and never even considered building a Gruul beatdown deck without Questing Beast. So a number, and of course this deck has no Questing Beast, it has Gemraiser instead. So a number of unintuitive card choices from the Emma Handy Autumn Burchett squad that led them to, I think, matching up as well as possible against the field of Gruul Adventures. And it's just cool to see the subtle choices paying off in that way.
Oh, I think we've all learned a thing or two this weekend. I remember when Autumn posted their list on Twitter, I was like, yep, going to take that for a spin, no worries at all. Loaded it up into Arena. I was like, whoa, hang on, what? Has there been an error importing this? There are so many cards here that I'm like, whoa, hang on. And then you play with it, you realize that this deck, it has a foot in both camps. And it's just so masterfully built to beat this field, right? And some of the people, as you see, unfortunately, Autumn take a bit too much of a shellacking here in game number 1. This deck has been built so well against this expected field, and it was unsurprising ultimately to see both Autumn and Emma make it all the way to the top 8, given that their standard deck was so well tuned for this meta.
Yep. Unfortunately, the dynamic has been Gruul was off to a roaring start towards the beginning of the tournament. I think it was an 8-1 record on the first day among 3 pilots. Little bit more of an average finish on day 2. And here on day 3, two Gruul decks being represented, that's wonderful. But so far, they have not really been coming out on top in these key matches. So a little bit of dynamic of the later in the tournament, the more the Omnath Adventures players are able to adapt, perhaps having learned over the course of the event. Maybe it's just a dynamic of the tougher players, tougher lists still surviving at this point in the event. But Austin Bursavich actually, is one game away from a 3-0 record in this matchup, beating Autumn in day 2 in the standard Swiss rounds and Emma Handy just last round.
Yes, he is going for a clean sweep here, knocking Emma out last round with her Gruul Adventure deck, and now this Gruul deck in the hands of Autumn Burchett, also potentially facing elimination with one more loss. But Autumn, of course, is a fighter. Will dig deep here, and if Austin is going to pick up this win, he is going to have to earn it. Sure as eggs is eggs. So let's get underway here with game number 2. This is the 2020 season grand finals. You're in the booth with me, Riley Knight. Joining me, Reed Duke, the American Hall of Famer. And it's great to have your company. Thanks for hanging out with us this weekend. It's been so good to explore both standard and historic here. Standard, obviously dominated by Omnath. Historic, heavily influenced by it as well. And the lone hero here, flying the non-Omnath flag, is Autumn Burchett, down a game as they kick things off with a Heart's Desire. Little 1-1 coming into play.
Yeah, thanks, Riley. I mean, I've been here, even not on camera. I've been glued to the screen all weekend. I think this has been a great event to watch. I really enjoyed the split format. I really enjoyed the level of competition. And yeah, just a privilege to be here with you covering these top 8 matches. Much better start for Autumn, by the way, this game. Just pretty much exactly what you want. Nice mix of lands and spells, starting right out the gates on turn 1. And on the play as well.
Curving out rather neatly here.
Ooh, just a nice attack for 11 damage on turn 3 on the play.
Jeez, yeah, with that Fabled Passage, that really turns up the heat. My goodness, look at this.
Brushfire Elemental is a card that has vastly exceeded my expectations as I've watched this weekend. You know, in my experimentations with Gruul, the early days of this format, I didn't even include Brushfire Elemental, which I almost feel embarrassed to say that, seeing how good it's been for Autumn Burchett and Emma Handy over the course of the event. In some ways, you feel like haste and landfall are a little bit at odds because, hey, you know, like if you have to play your land to play the haste creature, you're not triggering landfall that turn. But Brushfire Elemental has been great to just unload an additional hard hitting attacker on turn 3, 4, or 5. And also,
look at this. Austin, sorry to interrupt you there. Austin, very pleased with himself after ripping a Storm's Wrath, but is it going to be enough? Got a Lotus Cobra here.
Yeah, he was. That's the most emotive I've seen Austin be in this event. You know, looking in on his camera, he was like, he knew that he needed a card like that, something really special to have a chance of getting back in this game.
Yep, and didn't find a way to play it, of course, without the land, but does have the sweeper. Now, here's the thing. Autumn left that Fabled Passage uncracked in case of a stomp there, which would have been devastating, knocked out their entire board. But now is free to just really go to town. I mean, this Lotus Cobra can't block either of the elementals here, right? So this is 10 damage guaranteed. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, this
game and then
either
you've got the Gem Razor or indeed the Bone Crusher Giant in hand. This is just lethal here for Autumn. Turn 4, and by the way, get rid of that Lucky Clover on the way out. Huge attack here for 500,000 damage. I mean, we talked about the fact that the Gruul deck had some pretty decent medium draws, but that was right up the other end of the spectrum. That is about as good as it gets for Gruul.
Yeah, and I'm starting to think, Riley, we may have misread Austin's reaction there. I didn't appreciate that he was missing his 3rd land, but yeah, I mean, he would have needed something real special to get back out of that situation. Brazen Borrower would have bought some time, but you know that was an extremely punishing draw from Autumn.
Yeah, wow. We sort of talked about this deck having its foot in both camps, but I mean, in a situation like that, that was just a non-stop, unqualified beatdown from Autumn. Who, I mean, the draw was fine, right? Like it wasn't incredible. It was just a very, very solid draw. 1 drop into 2 drop into 2 drop that can just put a lot of pressure on. The Fabled Passage obviously working overtime as well. And the Gem Razor or the Stomp just to seal the deal there. And I really like that, punishing the Omnath Adventures deck for kind of not doing too much, missing land drops in the early turns.
Yeah, the real important subtlety of Autumn's draw in that game was the lands working out so smoothly, like untapped green, untapped red, double Fabled Passage with the landfall creatures, that's just as good as it gets.
Let's have a look at the openers here for these two players. In game number 3, the decider here, Austin Bursavich and Autumn Burchett in our lower bracket here, fighting for their tournament lives, both of them keeping decent openers here. And we are off to the races in game number 3.
That is a sideboard card that I'm not sure I've seen the Gruul players utilize this weekend.
We did see it get brought in yesterday, but I don't think we've actually seen it cast. But obviously very useful against something like a Brazen Borrower, something like a Stomp.
Mm. And, you know, what I love about this is the subtlety of high-level Magic. This is a marginal card, the Ranger's Guile. It's not obvious to me at face value whether you want this in the matchup or not, but it is becoming clear based on the way Austin is piloting in these matchups, the way he's navigating, and the way he's prioritizing having Brazen Borrower, Bonecrusher Giant, or Giant Killer at instant speed on these key turns. I think Ranger's Guile is going to be a particularly effective card against Austin Bursavich, the player. It's rare you see that level of fine-grained detail in a match of Magic.
Yeah, for sure. Austin now deploys a Lucky Clover for the turn. And Autumn, after taking the last turn off to burn that Cobra, stomp it away with a Bonecrusher Giant, is now ready to get back in the driver's seat and hoon off down the freeway. Now, a couple of interesting options here. Could play out the Mammoth. Could alternatively get in for 3 with the Brushfire Elemental in addition to that 1/1. We may be going down the Brushfire Elemental path here. Let's have a look.
I like that play because, you know, the bad news is Autumn can only play 1 spell this turn. The good news is if you make the play that you outlined, Riley, of Brushfire Elemental, play the Mammoth as a tapped land, then you get access to 4 mana on the following turn, which means playing a 3-drop creature and having Ranger's Guile open if that's what you decide you need to do. I think any other play that doesn't involve playing the Mammoth, it means it's going to be difficult to set up a good Ranger's Guile turn. So among many close options, this one seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, considering what's in the hand, and also, I mean, we have the access, the insight as to what's going on for Austin here. That Giant Killer looking juicy against Gruul, but Ranger's Guile could have something to say about that. So Brushfire Elemental successfully deployed and in for a total of 4 damage, thanks to that human token. Back to Austin now.
Austin's loving the opportunity to double a Beanstalk Giant with his Lucky Clover.
Of course.
That's going to leave him with 3 mana after making his land drop for the turn. So another really nice thing about Autumn's play is that it's pretty Giant Killer proof. You know, if and when Autumn plays something that can be targeted with Chop Down, Autumn's going to have access to Ranger's Guile to protect.
Evolving Wilds off the top as well. That's going to come in handy with that with old mate Brushy Brush there at some point. But here, potentially, you just play the Forest and the Bonecrusher Giant or Forest Lovestruck Beast and hold up the Ranger's Guile. Let's see the way that Autumn chooses to play it here. Okay, Evolving Wilds it is. Aggro mode engage.
And I think this is important because of finding the second red mana to have Embercleave the following turn.
Very true. Yes, of course. Fetch out a mountain with the Evolving Wilds, and Embercleave known to close the door on games like this with a real stamp of authority.
Not just close it, break it down in many cases.
Yeah, there's not much of a door left to close once Embercleave's finished, right? All right, Evolving Wilds cracked. And fetch up probably a mountain here, considering there is that Embercleave. Yes, indeed. Double red achieved. So now an attack for 6, I believe.
I think Austin is likely to go. Wow, he did not go for the Giant Killer. The reason he didn't is he sees those 2 creatures on adventure, so he's willing to take the 5 damage in order to double Chop Down at the end of the turn. Oh man, and if Autumn plays into this, this is the game for Austin. This he made a real sacrifice taking that damage, but if Autumn goes for the play that's they're highlighting right now,
yeah,
it's going to pay off majorly for Austin taking that 5 damage. No. Holy smokes!
Oh wow! So Austin here, stone cold. Austin Bursavich in the face of that huge whack of damage from Brushfire Elemental is going to be rewarded in spades with a chop down here.
Wow, everything about this turn is like
huge. Look at that.
Amazing. You saw Austin did not even pause to consider. And this is so important, Riley. Knowing what your game plan is ahead of time and executing it crisply and cleanly, that's what allowed that play to be possible for Austin. Because I think for many of us, you get attacked by that 5/5, you're looking at Giant Killer.
Get it out of here. Get it out of here.
Or at least you stop to think. You go, man, this is a tough one. Let me look at my life total. Let me think about this. Decide in combat whether or not I'm going to use the Giant Killer. I think if Austin had done that and had a significant pause, Autumn would have made a different play.
Yeah. I think Austin sold that very well with the unflinching acceptance of that 5 damage, and Autumn, in developing their board, faced a decisive punishment. Anyway, we move on now with the Fae of Wishes granted. 2 cards out of the sideboard here. Let's see what Austin's going to hunt up. You can see the sideboarding approach taken by Austin here. He's taken out at least 1 copy of Escape to the Wilds. Going to pick up Return to Nature here. Little insurance policy against Embercleave, I'd imagine.
Yeah, at this point, Austin's thinking, I did it, right? You know, I've developed my mana. I have Lucky Clover. I have card advantage. I have a clean board. So now I turn my sights to how does this game slip out of my hands? And the answer, of course, is Embercleave. So let's prepare with an instant speed answer in case something crazy happens.
And of course, that card is face up, so Autumn will know to play around as much as it ever is possible the disenchant effect there from Return to Nature. So Austin in a commanding position. It's not over just yet. Autumn still with a bevy of threats to play. One of them you can see there, Bone Crusher Giant under consideration. Still got that Stone Coil Serpent as well. And that Ranger's Guile sitting in hand. Maybe can still get some use out of that. Unfortunately, it can't protect the Embercleave, but still plenty of removal for it to counteract.
Yeah, one important dynamic is that the Return to Nature is face up and can kill Stone Coil Serpent. So I think Autumn is considering, you know, how important is it to protect the Stone Coil Serpent with the Ranger's Guile.
Okay, just going to run out the Serpent here. Maybe that could be bait. That could be a little tempting low-hanging fruit for Austin here, who of course did go and get that Return to Nature. I mean, maybe we'll be tempted to fire it off against this Stone Coil Serpent here. Let's see.
I think Austin's gonna take the approach of let's put some blockers out there and let's force Autumn to commit something in order to punch through. And that's when I make my move. That's when I react with my Return to Nature or my Stomp from my hand. So this is a great defensive strategy of, like, you put up some wall in front of the attacker, even if it's relatively flimsy, and you hold up open mana, and the combination of those two things makes it really, really difficult for the Gruul player to operate.
Let's see what's next up from Austin here. Slowly and delicately working his way through this turn. A key turn. He has scored an early victory in this game against Autumn with that key Giant Killer play. Certainly some real wrinkle-brain stuff from Austin, but he still has to seal the deal. And Autumn at the moment still with a decent board position here. See if it sticks around. Boney G off the top. We're going to see another granted first. Go to the sideboard once again. Perhaps that was a little bit of theatre there, tapping Omnath mana deliberately before casting Fae of Wishes. So negate and Fabled Passage.
So now Austin just has every eventuality covered with his open mana. He did not add much to the board that turn. So if there's some good news for Autumn, it's that you have a clean attack with the Bone Crusher Giant. There's no bells or whistles required. You could just get in some damage this turn. You can play another creature and then pass, forcing Austin to again hold up mana for all these reactive cards. So Austin's trying to thread the needle, is trying to be as careful as possible, but in doing so, he needs to make sure that he's not behaving too reactively and allowing himself to fall behind on the battlefield.
This negate, this return to nature don't do anything against the likes of Bone Crusher Giant, Kazandu Mammoth. So something to consider here. That Autumn does just have the old Gruul Smash available to them as an avenue here. See what this attack looks like.
So,
again, as you say, attacking with the Bone Crusher Giant, more or less free here.
Yeah, I mean, both players have access to 2 instant speed plays. Austin's are face up, Autumn's are not. So I think Autumn will probably not commit much other than just attacking and getting in some damage, and then just play the Kazandu Mammoth post combat. And again, it's good because you sort of say, well, Austin, either your mana is going to waste and you're going to have to pass again with 4 mana open next turn, or you're going to use your cards in a way that's maybe less than perfect.
There is a Bone Crush Giant hiding out in Austin's hand there. Don't forget about that. So it could change the dynamic of this combat step as we see Autumn get that attack in. Fey of Wishes on the Bone Crusher Giant.
And most conservative possible block here from Austin. You could make a case for blocking any of those 3 creatures would be totally reasonable, but he's making the one that's going to protect his life total the best.
But the one for chump blocking the 4/3 here. I mean, could return it to hand. Is that too risky?
That is a play that's available. I mean, Austin would have to discard 2 very strong cards in order to do that, and then invest mana to sort of get back with the Fey of Wishes. I don't think he wants to do that. I don't think he wants to invest 4 mana into Granted again. So I think he'll either try something with Bone Crusher Giant or he'll just let it die.
Okay, there's the Bone Crusher Giant now. Stomp, copied with Lucky Clover.
Okay, so I love that Autumn is letting the copy resolve and choose a target before they take any action.
Yeah,
the second,
and you can see that. Go ahead, sorry.
The second copy is targeting Bone Crusher Giant. So 1 on Stone Coil Serpent, 1 on Bone Crusher Giant. Autumn has several plays available to them now. Let's see what happens.
So Ranger's Guile obviously can protect a creature here, +1/+1, and hexproof. And where's it going to go?
Probably the Bone Crusher Giant. I'm not sure. And if Austin negates this, the game is over because Embercleave will be lethal.
I think I see what's happening here. I think Autumn is attempting to bait Austin into either firing off either the negate or the return to nature here, destroy target artifact, in order to then flash in an Embercleave. If Austin falls for this, this is the most fractal brain play I have ever seen. There's a Fabled Passage cracked in order to maybe fire off this negate, fire off this return to nature. Now it's going to resolve.
He changed his mind.
Ice cold.
I knew Austin was not going to do that. I would have been really surprised if he switched all of a sudden from this very conservative play around everything line to suddenly leaving himself dead to Embercleave.
Yeah.
But you could tell he was thinking about it. That was a tense moment.
That was incredible. Jeez, my guts were all churned up there. That was incredible. Wow. I mean, a little bit of theatre perhaps from Austin. But here, Autumn's still in a decent position. Got that 3/3, or the 2/2 Stonecore Serpent at the end of turn, and then the Kazandu Mammoth joining it as well with Fabled Passage in hand. Let's not forget about that Embercleave. Austin does have some decent reactive options in both Negate and Return to Nature. Let's not forget about those adventure cards hiding out on the right-hand side of his hand as well. In addition, of course, to the Escape to the Wild. So this turn is going to be critical, Reed.
Yeah, so we'll see if Austin is able to make another conservative play where he passes with mana open. He's going to have to, because that Embercleave that's a massive amount of damage that blockers are not going to be able to deal with.
Oh yeah.
In the meantime, what can he do to put some warm bodies on this battlefield?
See where we start off. That's 5 mana. Indicates to me that maybe Escape to the Wilds is first on the docket. Let's see.
Ooh, man, this feels a little risky to me. I guess you can go, at worst, you play 2 untapped lands, you play Giant Killer, you play Fey of Wishes, you have some blockers and 2 mana open.
Yeah, I mean you have to leave
it survives.
Open, right?
It survives.
All right. So now Austin's going to have to populate the battlefield. See what he chooses to do it with. But yeah, as I say, I don't think he can. He can't. You've got to put 2 lands aside that are just, you cannot tap them. You've got to keep them up for either Return to Nature or Negate. So Giant Killer. And
this has been an incredible game so far. If you're watching at home and you have the audio, you're not totally tuned in, I recommend you drop what you're doing. You tune in for the last couple of turns of this game. If you missed the beginning part of it, go back, rewatch later on YouTube. This is high-level Magic. It's not a very long game, but it is packed with such crucial decisions. Both players playing exceptionally well, giving themselves every opportunity to win the game, giving the opponents every opportunity to make game-losing errors. And so far, both players have been able to to survive, to keep playing, keep fighting.
All right, here's the Fabled Passage. Pairs so nicely with that Kazandu Mammoth. Makes it a 5/5. Austin with just 2 blockers remaining. Embercleave in hand for Autumn. But Austin is packing answers to it in the form of both Return to Nature and Negate. The attack now from Autumn. This has been one of the most incredibly high-level games of Magic I've ever watched. Both players really at the bleeding edge here, putting on the very best performance you could hope for. And we'll see how it ends up now with Autumn. A huge attack here that could determine the fate of the game. Austin last turn firing off that Escape to the Wilds, thinking long and hard about this block because a misstep, a fumble here, Reed, is going to be lethal.
Austin's position is good here. There's 2 crucial things that happened. Number one is Autumn drew nothing but a basic forest for this turn, whereas an additional action card, like maybe a Primal Might or a Ranger's Guile, that could have been game changing. Just the one Evercleave to work with, and Austin has that covered with his 2 mana. Additionally, he had a really good Escape to the Wilds. He found his lands. He found a Bone Crusher Giant, which of course is getting copied by Lucky Clover. So I think all Austin has to do is enact that super careful play around everything game plan that he's been employing up to this point. And then once he untaps all his mana, I think he's going to find a safe way to navigate to a win. So good position for Austin. He has the tools seemingly, but there's still Magic to be played, and he's got to navigate carefully.
Still Magic to be played, yes indeed. There's the block on the Mammoth with the 1/2 Giant Killer, and the 1/4 jumps in the way of the Stone Coil Serpent here, meaning this human can get across uncontested for 1 damage, knock Austin down to 2. We haven't seen him play any Omnath so far. It's made Austin's job all the harder, all the more difficult for not having access to the stabilization of the Omnath life gain trigger. So, wham bam and thank you ma'am, in comes the human for 1. The other 2 are blocked, leaving Austin with a lone 1/2 or 1/4 blocker, excuse me, and leaving Autumn with not a lot going on, just that Embercleave, which, as we say, is covered by either the Return to Nature or the Negate.
Now, a number of things I could see happening at the end of the turn. I think Austin, there's a lot of pressure on him to spend his mana because he's got to catch up. He may choose Bone Crusher Giant, maybe just, well, actually, he can't kill the Kazandu Mammoth, importantly, because of the uncracked Fabled Passage. If Austin chooses to end of turn Return to Nature, the Stone Coil Serpent, I could see Autumn just paying full retail price to flash in that Embercleave.
Yep.
But since he did choose Bone Crusher Giant and still has Return to Nature in hand, that's not really going to be an appealing option anymore.
So Bone Crusher Giant here, the Stomp being copied, 1 copy going after that human. And not too much to be done about that. Away goes the human. And here's the 2nd copy now after the Stone Coil Serpent. And again, Autumn unable to save the snake from its fate. It's going to be left with a lonely Kazandu Mammoth as a 3/3. Back to Austin now. A Ketria Trime off the top, but look at all those cards waiting, ready to be cast, either in the exile zone thanks to having gone on an adventure, or thanks to an Escape to the Wilds.
Let's note that pretty crucial life total for Austin Bursavich. 2 life. He would have been dead to us. Bone Crusher Giant stopped there if Autumn had it. I think Austin wisely deduced that Autumn did not have it based on the way that the game had played. He took the calculated risk, and now he's going to prioritize holding up negate, and he's going to dig for an Omnath to gain some life.
Doesn't find another 5 cards off the top with an escape to the wilds, and still hasn't managed to find this deck's namesake card. But a bevy of options here for the American. Let's see in which direction he chooses to go. He does still, I mean, he has to still walk a fine line here, Reed, on just 2 life against Gruul.
So if I'm Austin, I'm taking 2 lands, probably Forest Island. I'm just putting them off to the side. These lands are not doing anything except holding up my instance.
Yes,
in a perfect world, you might even do 4 mana. But he does have to scramble a little bit to play these Escape to the Wilds cards and catch up on the battlefield. Using Beanstalk Giants is ideal because that will set him up really, really well for future turns. They're basically free at this point, you know, because you get three lands untapped for every 3 mana you tap. And then he's probably just going to want to deploy some creatures.
And those Beanstalk Giant, the Fertile Footsteps, set him up very nicely for the following turns, assuming that he can get there. Is there anything off the top that Autumn can draw here that will, you know, enormously change the texture of this game? Something like a Brushfire Elemental?
Yes, Brushfire Elemental is that's powerful because that circumvents both negate and return to nature, and of course that card can't be blocked by small creatures power 2 or less. So you see Austin reaching for the 4/3 Bone Crusher Giant, perhaps having that in mind. But you know, there's a lot of relevant draws for Autumn. That's there's no doubt about that. Even something like a Bone Crusher Giant, second Embercleave. I mean, a number of things. Primal Might. These are things that Austin will have to fight through.
Yeah.
So, you know, pretty much anything besides the basic forest that Autumn drew on their last draw step is going to be huge here.
So, Autumn here, considering playing this Embercleave end of turn, may do it here because obviously they know the Embercleave. We've said it before, we'll say it again. It is covered by the negate, it's covered by the return to nature. But if you fire this off here, you put Austin in a position where this has to be answered. And if Austin taps out, the top card of Autumn's library could be decisive. Imagine if it's another Embercleave. Imagine if it's another must-answer threat that can end the game. Then and there, Embercleave resolves, suits up the Mammoth. It's going to be a 4/4 trampling double striker here.
Yeah, so there's some outs here. Crucially, you do not have to be attacking for Embercleave to be automatically attached. So
no.
Autumn does not have to invest the 3 mana to equip.
Okay, let's see. Off the top for Autumn here, it's going to be a critical draw for them. And it's a forest. Okay, well, not with a little shake of the head there for Autumn, not what they were hoping to see. But still, Embercleave demands an answer. And the Mammoth can get in for at least 5 with a landfall trigger here.
It's the joy and pain of Magic the Gathering, Riley. You know, it's such a long, hard path to get to this point, to be playing in the top 8 of the grand finals. You work so hard, you play so well to get to be even alive with outs at this point, and then, you know, the crucial moment, it's 2 forests, which that's happened to all of us. But it's crazy how such a high stakes match can come down to a key moment like that.
Oh yeah. Yes, that was a key draw there for Autumn, and unfortunately wasn't what they wanted to see, but still going to make the best of it here. Plays the forest. That's going to juice up that Mammoth. It's now a 5/5 plus the Embercleave 6/6 double strike trampler. But let's not forget, return to nature, waiting in the wings to fling that Embercleave right back into the lake. And now the attack. Is there any reason not to send the Mammoth in here, Reed?
It's the only play you can make. Well, yes, there is a reason. The reason is Austin is intending to double block and then return to nature the Embercleave, which would have 5 power and 7 toughness, blocking a 5/5 creature. So yeah, I'm going to amend my statement and actually say that based on the face-up cards, Autumn really probably should not attack.
Okay, let's see if they go for it all the same. I mean, at the very least, it trades with one of those opposing creatures. Nope. Okay, going to sit back. And Autumn will need a little kindness off the top of the library here, as Austin, who has been desperately scrabbling against the cliff face to stay in this game, and has done a masterful job of it too. So Bursavich, I think, considering playing this Return to Nature here to destroy the Embercleave. I mean, he wants to do it at some point, so maybe this is the point at which to do it, using mana efficiently. Means you can hold up mana for just negate later on.
He's also trying to be really careful and parse out what could be in Autumn's hand. Like, on the one hand, you could Return to Nature, and it looks really bad if Autumn has a redundant copy of the legendary artifact in hand. But, you know, he could piece out that's just an impossibility based on Autumn not attacking there.
Yes.
So,
yeah,
you know, he very well could have done that if he wanted to.
Because obviously, if you have the second Embercleave, they Return to Nature it, you just flash in another one.
Precisely.
No. And now, look at this. A 12/12 Beanstalk Giant is going to really dominate this battlefield, even in the face of all that Autumn has got to work with here, this enormous mammoth. A second Edgewall Innkeeper as well. And you'll note, again, 4 mana this time being kept up. And Austin feeling confident enough now to get an attack in with the Fey of Wishes. 20-turn clock, mate.
Sure.
All right, off the top, a Love-Struck Beast this time for Autumn. Wonder if that changes the equation at all. Bursavich putting on an absolute clinic here as he desperately clings to hope.
Yeah, this was a really challenging game to navigate. There was a brief snapshot where I felt Austin maybe was playing a little too conservatively and should have taken more chances in order to keep pace on the battlefield. But, you know, there's no denying that his careful play has really paid off in terms of navigating around this Embercleave, getting that absolutely devastating double chop down with the giant killer earlier in the game. I think, you know, early in the match, we kind of outlined this dynamic that the Gruul players were hacking and slashing through the field, through the Omnath Adventures players on day number 1, partially on day number 2 as well. It's gotten tougher for them as they get to the stage in the tournament. And I think part of it is just the level of play that their opponents are putting up, the Austin Bursaviches, the Gabriel Nassifs.
Yeah. Oh, and I mean, this game is an absolute testament to that, to the raw skill and talent of the players that have assembled for this for the season grand finals here. It's been. I mean, I say it's been a clinic from Austin. It's been a clinic from both players. Autumn has shown how to weather a storm like this, how to push through a game plan through seemingly insurmountable odds here, especially now as Austin reaches for the sideboard once again. A fling, and what else is he going to go for? Remember, this is 2 copies plus the original of Granted here, or Granted if you're from Adelaide. Gets a Primal Might as well, and going to finish things off with one final card from the board. Let's see what it is. I mean, Primal Might plus Fling, pretty potent combination there, Reed. You've already got the Beanstalk Giant. This could be the old OTK here, I think. And a once and future. Austin Bursavich, excuse me, very close to taking this one out. A massive 14/14 Beanstalk Giant. Autumn on what all of a sudden looks like a very precarious 19 now with this Fling in play. Going to go for the Primal Might, fight that human. It's now a 19 power Beanstalk Giant. And a Fling here can seal the deal for Austin Bursavich, who beats Autumn Burchett in one of the most incredible games of Magic, Read, that I have ever seen in my entire broadcasting career. What a game.
Yeah, truly just a pleasure to watch that one. Interesting matchup, jam-packed with action.